Shalom, this is Yair Davidiy, speaking to you on behalf of Brit-Am Hebrew Awareness, our organization, our movement that works in order to impart knowledge and to impart awareness of the Hebrew origins of peoples in Western nations, peoples in the USA, peoples in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, peoples in Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, France, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, Ireland. All those areas are where we find the descendants of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. So Australia, New Zealand, everywhere there is one redshift, one continuum of people who are related to each other, similar values, similar cultural traditions, and similar outlooks on life. And they are all descended from the tribes of Israel, or at least amongst them we find a substantial proportion of the population who have such origins. We don't know what exact percentage it is in every case, but our impression is that it is quite high, and that the Israelite tribes in those areas determine the character, the national character of the peoples concerned. And we have come to these conclusions after a lot of study, a lot of work, a lot of research, and we also built on that which had been done before us, or had been done parallel to us, and we did a lot of our own, quite a bit of our own that we merited to be able to do and to receive information from different sources. We use the Bible, we use the rabbinical commentaries on the Bible, we use history, historical sources, linguistics, archaeology, mythology. Anything which is somehow or other pertinent to the subject, we use it, and we show how from all the different fields, evidence all comes together to prove the lost 10 tribes are amongst Western nations. And this is important, this is what people should know about, and they should be aware of it. It concerns their future, is connected to the future of their children, also of their ancestors. It brings the ancestors and the offspring together. It is important in its own right, and in addition to that, there will become a time when we will want to know these things, and these things will have an importance that we are not yet aware of. God Almighty will reveal himself to us at some time or other, to all of us, and lead us along the right path. In the meantime, this knowledge is coming to prepare the way, as if to say. At all events, it is something which should be known, it is something which can be verified, and it is something that is worth knowing, and we hope you will appreciate knowing about it. Now this present talk concerns the tribe of Dan. The tribe of Dan was in the north. The tribe of Dan was the head of the three tribes, Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. When they came out of Egypt, when the Israelites were delivered from Egypt by Moses, under Moses, they were in the wilderness for 40 years. Once they were in the wilderness, they were encamped around the tabernacle. The northern section, headed by Dan, was in the north, and that was the tribes of Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. And Dan is an important tribe, and Dan was described in the book of Judges as living on ships. Dan ba'oniot yishkon. Dan ba'oniot yishkon, Dan will dwell on ships, it says. And when we compare places that we identify with Dan, that we know that Dan was in those regions, and we find a surprising degree of association with seafaring amongst peoples, whom we have already shown to, from other points of view, to be associated with Dan. So this is what we are going to speak about. It's worth knowing. Verses concerns a verse in the book of Judges chapter 5, verse 17, saying that Dan will live on ships. And it was said by Deborah. Deborah was a prophetess. She was a female prophet. She was a prophetess in the Bible. The story is found in the book of Judges, chapters 4 and 5. That time the Israelites were being oppressed by the Canaanite king Yair. Yavin, he was reigned over Hatzor, a place called Hatzor in the Upper Galilee, north of Israel, north of present-day Israel. The leader of his army was Sisera. And Sisera was had his army and ran about in the same area, and they had 900 chariots of iron. And by use of this armory, they were enabled to rule and terrorize the Israelites for 20 years. Deborah was the leader of Israel at that time. Deborah was a prophetess, as we said. She was the wife of Lapidot. See Judges 4:4. She held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, which was somewhat to the south, the area of Ephraim. And the Israelites went up to her to have their dispute settled. She was the judge. And she lived there, and she was the leader of the country, of the people at that time. And she received him, she was inspired by God Almighty to send to Barak, who's an important person, Barak the son of Abinah, from the tribe of Naphtali, apparently, lived in Kadesh, Naphtali, which was in the Upper Galilee, and she sent a message to him telling him to take warriors from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun to go up to war against Sisera and to defeat him. And indeed that is what happened. The Canaanites were defeated in the mountain of Tabor, and the defeat was due to their fighting, and also due to the Kishon River, which was nearby. The Kishon River had apparently flooded and had entrapped all the chariots with a flood of mud, as if to say that it weighed all the chariots down and stopped them from being able to moving, and enabled the Israelite warriors to come and kill the inhabitants of these chariots, the drivers and the warriors in the chariots. And by virtue of that, the Israelites won the war. Sisera, the head of the Canaanite armies, he ran away, he fled. When he came to the house, to the tent of Yair, Yair was the wife of Heber the Canaanite. They had apparently a neutral attitude to what was going on, and Yair invited him in, gave him milk, and caused him to fall asleep, and then she killed him whilst he was sleeping. And that may more or less put the stamp on the victory of the Israelites, of the Hebrews, over their enemies. And Deborah sang a song celebrating the triumph. See Judges chapter 5. And from this song of victory, it appears that the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali, who had fought against the Canaanites, they'd also received reinforcements from the tribes of Ephraim, from the tribe of Benjamin, and from Machir, who was a major clan amongst the tribe of Manasseh. And they had come to the help of Zebulun and Naphtali against the Canaanites. So other tribes, however, who had refrained, who had abstained from assistance, as it is indicated, and those tribes are mentioned are Reuben, Gilead, Dan and Asher. Gilead could have been an important clan amongst Manasseh. That was known as Gilead or Gilad in Hebrew, Gilead. Or it could refer to the whole area east of the Jordan, which was divided up into two areas, Gilead and Bashan. Gilead encompassed the areas of Reuben, or the tribe of Gad, and also of Hesed and Manasseh, whereas Bashan continued onwards from the tribe of half Manasseh forward, onwards, and encompassed areas much to the north. And we'll return to this. Anyway, Deborah says, Judges 5, Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan. And Dan, why will he linger by the ships? Asher remained on the coast and stayed in his coast. That is how it is translated. In a commonly accepted translation, and all the translations more or less go in this way. We, however, went according to the simple Hebrew of the Bible, and we see different nuances that are worth noting. The passage in the chapters. The passage in 5:17 of the book of Judges can be reinterpreted, retranslated, more correctly translated as saying Gilead over the Jordan dwelt. Gilead dwelt on the other side of the Jordan. As for Dan, why will he sojourn in ships? Why will Dan live in ships in the future? He also said, Asher settled on coast of the sea, and in its inlets will he dwell. Indeed, Asher, the tribe of Asher, was on the coastland of what is now Lebanon, northern Israel, Lebanon, Syria, all that belonged to the tribe of Asher. This is confirmed by Egyptian inscriptions refer to the Ashuru in that area, the tribe of Asher. Also the Bible indicates it, when we understand it properly. Asher settled on the coast of the sea, and in its inlets will he dwell. And we find later on that Asher, along with Dan and Naphtali, they settled in Scandinavia. From Scandinavia emerged the Vikings, and the Vikings have a name. Viking is said to mean dweller of the inlets, dweller of the bays and the coves along the coastlands of Norway and other parts of Scandinavia. You have inlets, bays, and narrow coves, one could say what are called coves, inlets from the sea, and fjords, and the ships of the Vikings used to hide there or take shelter there and sail out from there to attack areas in the west. And they were called the Vikings because of it. Viking means dwellers of these coves and inlets. And Asher is described as someone who dwells on the coast of the sea, settled on the coast of the sea, and will dwell in these inlets. We find Asher amongst the Vikings, so this is important. And so too it says, Dan will dwell in ships, will live in ships. And we will see an association between Dan and shipping and seafaring. So in the Song of Deborah, Dan is associated with ships, but Dan was not the only Israelite tribe that was associated with ships. In the blessing of Jacob, Genesis chapter 49, the tribe of Zebulun is blessed that they will be connected with the sea, that they dwell on the shores of the sea, that there will be a haven for ships. Also, the Midrash says that the stand of Zebulun bore the picture of a ship. Also, Asher is associated with a ship. Other tribes are associated with ships. The Israelites in general had been promised that their seed would possess the gate of their enemies and the gate of those who hated them. See Genesis 24:16, Genesis 24:16. And this means important international thoroughfares, that strategic pathways, that most of which are reached by the sea. And the British Empire, and after them the USA, with its hundreds of overseas bases all over the world, made a point of taking control of the major international thoroughfares and pathways, in other words, the gates of those who hate them, strategic points in the sea, that enable them to have some control over international affairs. Lord Jackie Fisher and also John Fisher, he was one of the most prominent sailors in British history. He claimed in 1904 that 5 keys lock up the world. There are 5 keys to control of the world from a geographical strategic point of view. So there's Singapore, the Cape of Good Hope, Alexandria in Egypt, Gibraltar, that is where Gibraltar in Spain, which is under the control of the British and has been for several hundred years, and it controls the Straits of Gibraltar, has some control over who enters from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea and who goes out. And Dover in the southeast of England, which controls the coastlands of Europe, facilitates such control. And all of these belong to Britain, and indeed, nowadays the USA also has bases in these same areas or adjacent areas or parallel to them. And the USA has taken over from where Britain left off together and is working together with Britain. They still rely on international thoroughfares and bases and pathways and strategic points for much of their military strategy and even for their foreign policy. Now they're facing competition from China, but But that is, we'll see how it turns out. The Chinese are trying to take over and trying to do the same thing as they did, to take control of important areas. But in the meanwhile, America and Britain have the control, and they have had it for some time. The Israelites also promised that they would be in many waters, see Numbers 24:7, in other words, in several oceans. The Israelites were promised that will become seafarers, see Isaiah 42:10, that they would sail the seas, and that they would live in the isles of the sea, see Isaiah 11:11, 24:15, 42:4, 51:4-5, 69:9. That is chapter 60, verse 9. And all of these promises were made to all of the tribes of Israel. They were made to all of the tribes of Israel, all of the 10 tribes. The 10 tribes were separate from Judah. Initially you had 12 tribes of Israel. They had Judah, and in the south, the tribes of Judah, that is Judah, Benjamin and Levi in the south, and in the north you had the 10 tribes. The 10 tribes separated from Judah. They set up their own kingdom. And eventually they were conquered by the Assyrians, taken to exile, and they disappeared. They lost consciousness of their ancestry, and the world lost awareness of who they are. Nevertheless, they can be traced. We have traced them. We have traced them to peoples who settled amongst Western Europe, and from there they colonized other areas such as North America, Australia, New Zealand, and so on. And we have proven that this can be proved from history and from other evidence, and it was prophesied by the Bible. And why did they have to do this? Because in the beginning, as far as we understand from the sources, when the Israelites came out of Egypt, they had a task. They were supposed to keep the commandments, keep all the commandments, to develop the Torah, to live by the Torah, and also to establish a kingdom in the land of Israel, to conquer the land of Israel, the greater land of Israel, from the Nile to the Euphrates, to colonize it, to settle it, and to induce all the peoples of the earth, by example and by force, by diplomacy, by all the powers that they would have, that would be given unto them, to go along the right path, to follow a basic humanizing policy of righteous living, not to become Jewish, not to keep all of the commandments, but not to go around killing each other, not to go around doing things that should not be done. There are basic laws that God wants all of humanity to do. He doesn't want them all to become Jewish. He wants them to live a righteous life, and that in the same, alongside the development of the law by Israelites, and in the end it was decided that Judah and the tribes attached to Judah would develop the Torah, whereas the 10 tribes were to take the other portion of the promise and to develop and to upgrade and to evolve upwards and bring the rest of the world with them. And to do this they had to be exiled, they had to forget who they were, to go down to the level of the Gentiles at that time, and to evolve upwards, and in the course of evolving upwards to elevate the rest of the world with them, which they have done. And eventually they will continue to do this, or the time will come when the two halves, the two portions of Israelite nation, Judah and Israel, will have to come back together and reunite, as described in Ezekiel 37, also in Isaiah 11:11, and in different other passages in the Bible. At all events, we see from what we have just described that all of the Israelites were to be associated with the sea, or were to be involved with the promises of being seafarers. And we know that out of the 10 tribes, the tribes of Joseph, the 2 tribes of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, were to receive a special portion. See 1 Chronicles 5, 1-2, Genesis 49:6, other verses, that Ephraim and Manasseh, the 2 tribes of Joseph, were to receive the firstborn right, and they were to have a special portion, much greater a much greater portion than all of the other tribes. And that is what they would receive. And so too, therefore, they too would be involved with the sea and with seafaring. And we identify these peoples with the English-speaking peoples, peoples of Britain and the USA. And this is indeed what has happened. Nevertheless, there was a special blessing was given to Dan, or a prediction was made about Dan, concerning to what living in the sea, that also together with all this, was to be fulfilled. We find Dan in Scandinavia. Dan in the blessing of Jacob, Dan in the blessing of Jacob is referred to as a provider of justice, is someone who does justice, enforces justice, is also described as a viper by the road, biting the heel of the horse, causing his rider to fall backwards, see Genesis 49:17. Moses referred to Dan as emerging from Bashan. Deuteronomy 33 verse 22 about Dan, he said, Dan is a lion's cub, the son of a lion, springing out of Bashan. Bashan was east of the Jordan, north of Gilead, and Bashan stretched up right up from northern Israel all the way up through Syria up until Turkey, along the edges of the Euphrates River. Conventionally, we know that Dan received initial area around the area what is now Jaffa, Tel Aviv, on this coast of Israel. Jaffa, Tel Aviv, even now in modern spoken Hebrew, this area is referred to as Gush Dan, meaning the area of Dan. After that, Dan also received a region in the Upper Galilee, around Dan in the Galilee, near the Sea of Galilee. And Dan was in these two places, but we found that Dan was also in other areas. Around the Gush Dan in the area of Jaffa, then he moved to a place called Leshem, apparently in the Galilee, in Joshua. This is described in Joshua chapter 19, of Dan moving to this area named Leshem, and this area named Leshem had, Leshem incidentally means a precious stone. The stone of Dan on the breastplate of the high priest was known as a Leshem. And it says that this place named Leshem was renamed Dan in honor of their forefather Dan. And then we have another story, another tale, another account, which is similar in some ways, in Judges chapter 18, describes how a group of the Danites, like the other ones, they left their place where they were in the south, they moved to the north, and they conquered Laish, a place called Laish, and they renamed it Dan in honor of their forefather. So different commentators say that Laish and Leshem are the same places, are the same place, and they're just telling the account from a different point of view, as if to say. But this is not so. We have proven elsewhere that Leshem and Laish were actually two different places. Leshem was in the Upper Galilee, what place known as Dan, whereas Laish was another place known as Luash. It was in the region called Cilicia, or Cilicia, in southeast Turkey. It was an important area, and that is where Luash was, and from there Dan came up and conquered that area and renamed it Dan, and that too is fulfills the expression that he will be the son of a lion springing from Bashan, because it adjoins Bashan, and he springed out and took that area, conquered it and settled it, and he had a contingent from Yadi, a contingent from Judah beside him, also had elements from Gad in the area. It was an Israelite region, and there we find the Dananu, or Danim they are called, or that is Dan, people from Dan in plural. They were people who ruled in that region. They had a kingdom called Small. Also they controlled the Tarshish in Cilicia, and they ruled over it. And they also conquered Cyprus and different islands, and for a while they may even have conquered ancient Greece, and influenced ancient Greece, as the Greek legends indicate. And they were known as the Dananu or the Danim, and they were there. And they were there until they too were conquered by the Assyrians and taken into exile along with the rest of the 10 tribes. This, as we said, they had emerged from the Bashan. They are described as leaping out of the Bashan. Later we find people from Dan and from Asher and from Naphtali in the region of Scandinavia. Scandinavia is referred to by classical sources as Scandinavia, meaning the land of the Scythians. It is also, according to Pliny quoting from Pythias in the 300s BCE, that is quite early, that Scandinavia was known as Basilia, and Basilia is another name for the Bashan, as proven by archaeological inscriptions from the region of Mesopotamia, that is ancient Assyria and Babylon. So Scandinavia was named after the Bashan, was named Basilia, and that is where we find these tribes who are already in a region connected to Bashan and in beforehand. The 10 tribes were taken into exile by the Assyrians in their places of exile. They eventually established their independence and they moved northwards, or they moved to the west. They, in several roundabout routes, they migrated in different bodies of people, of migrating hosts, of migrating nations from the east to the west. Some of them went by way of the sea, others went overland. They all converged in the same areas in Western Europe and Northern Europe, and that includes Scandinavia, and a portion of them came to the area of Denmark, was now known as Denmark. Denmark is named after Dan. Danmark is how the Danes call the country. Danmark meaning the borderland or the area of Dan. Dan was their forefather according to their own traditions in Denmark, and in Denmark we find them. We find them fulfilling the prediction concerning them that they would dwell in ships, that they would be associated with seafaring. Denmark became known for its Vikings, the Vikings who sailed the seas raiding the coasts of England, Scotland and Ireland, and together with the Norwegians settling in those areas. We also find Dan being very important in international sea trade. Dan has always been amongst the top 10 sea traders, even though it is a small population, it is a small country, it's only 6 million people, but it's been always amongst the top 10 sea traders in the world. Historically, they established trading posts and attempts at colonies in North America and other places in West Africa, and they had an international trade going for them. 20% of Danish exports still are concerned with sea trade. Danish ship owners handle about 10% of world trade. And Danish shipping is the largest export industry of Denmark, so we see here an association between descendants of Dan and the sea. So too in Ireland. In Ireland we find a portion of Dan. Actually we identify Ireland with the tribe of Asher, but we also find other Israelite tribes in Ireland amongst the Irish, including Dan. Dan was important in Ireland. It had amongst the Vikings, so people from Denmark who settled there. Also the tribe of Danna, who was an early people before the Milesians. They too settled in Ireland, and they were important. Also in Danish, in Irish mythology, they attribute one of the names of their forefathers is named Don, and Don and Dan are different ways of saying Dan in Hebrew. And Don too is found amongst the Welsh as one of their ancestors. So we see that the Irish had an association with Dan. A portion of the people of Ireland are descended from Dan. And in ancient times the Irish really were a sea power. Niall Norgialach, Niall of the 9 hostages, he was an Irish king. He founded the dynasty that gave rise to most of the Irish kingdoms, and he had a naval empire. He reached to Scotland and Scandinavia, is eventually killed on a sea road to the English Channel. But he shows the extent of his enterprises, of his projects, shows a sea power. Ireland in its early days was a sea power. It was quite an important sea power. And they also they made raids on Britain and Scotland. And they established colonies in different areas of the British Isles. The Irish are also known as fishermen and pirates. They were important. But eventually the English conquered them, and these professions were neglected, and they became less prominent on the seas. And they became part of the British Empire. They don't like to say it, they don't like to admit it, but they helped keep the British Empire together. About a third of the English soldiers in the empire were of Irish descent. They also had important leaders came from Ireland, and then the rank and file also was reinforced with Irishmen. And the British had a navy, and Irishmen served in this navy. They identified with it, they benefited from it. The British Navy was also the Irish Navy. Britain was a naval power, and therefore so was Ireland. The Battle of Trafalgar against the French in 1805, the British Navy under Nelson defeated the French Navy of Napoleon. More than 25% of the British seamen at that time were from Ireland, mostly from the south. Even after independence, even after the Irish broke away from England and set up their own republic, there came the Second World War, and numerous Irishmen crossed the seas to serve in the British forces. And about 10,000 Irishmen, which is quite a large number, relatively speaking, about 10,000 Irishmen served in the Royal Navy during World War II. So here we see, the fulfillment of the prophecy concerning Ireland and ships being fulfilled both in Denmark, through Denmark and through Ireland. Another place where we find people from Dan is Devon. Devon in southwest England. Devon in southwest England. Devon and Cornwall. Cornwall are there on the very south, with the very edge of the country, right down in the bottom. Devon and Cornwall are known as the West Country, along with Somerset and Dorset, and from those came a good portion of the early seafarers of England. Devon was known in ancient times as Dannonia. Dannonia is another way of saying the name Dan. It was also called Dannonia. There was another name for it, not only Dannonia, but also Dannonia, that is named after Dan. And it had the people from Dan within its population, and these people, the people of Devon and Cornwall, are quite distinct from the English. This has been proven by DNA for what it's worth. The DNA is sometimes reliable, sometimes it isn't, but in this case they have shown that both Cornwall and Devon had different people from the mainstream English, and they have always had and had their own unique characteristics that are similar to those of the Danites. Devon had a relatively small population. Even now there's only 1,200,000 people, which is not a large number for such a place. And in the past it was much, much less, but it was very important in the development of the English sea power. After Herman to rule the waves, How the British Navy Shaped the Modern World, is an important book, published in 2004. He deals at some length with the importance of seamen from the West Country, and especially Devon, in the naval history of Britain. And he says the West Country bred a distinctive kind of mariner. They were inured to the dangers of the sea, and they were resourceful. They were independent. They had an independent intelligence. West Country sailors were notably clannish. They stayed together. They were suspicious of strangers. They had a distinct maritime culture, its own values, its own outlook, its own life, and even its own language. They were described as pillagers. The Spanish ambassador dubbed them savages in the eyes of others. Other people didn't like them because they used the sea to their own advantages. It was out of this rough, undisciplined, but fearless and resourceful population that the Elizabethan ages would find its greatest sailors. When the English came to power, came to prominence in the time of Queen Elizabeth, and the sailors of Queen Elizabeth, the greatest sailors of Queen Elizabeth, and also after Elizabeth, came from the region of Devon and also from the West Country. And he mentions names: John Hawkins, Francis Drake, Walter Raleigh, Humphrey Gilbert, John Davis. They were also related to one another by blood or marriage. Cornwall produces many great families of sailors. Even in the 1800s, Devonshire supplied the Navy with more officers than any other county in England. And he goes on at length. So Devon was very important. Devon was known as Dannonia, and from Devon came a great number of very important sailors, important leaders at sea, important raiders of the enemy, important explorers, explored important military strategies at sea, and important developers of navigation using the latest instruments at the time, the newest methods that they could obtain. And this is what they did, and this is what they have always done. And this has enabled and helped, this attitude has enabled the British Empire to exist, and the British Navy to be able to defeat every other navy on earth. So we see that the Prophetess Deborah, she described Dan as living in ships, see Judges 5:17 in the Hebrew. The descendants of Dan, like other Israelites, would be found in many waters, as it was prophesied in Numbers 24:7. And we find from the ancient times to the ancient Dannonia, and then from the Dannonia, the Danes of Denmark, and the Danes in Ireland, from Devon and Dannonia, and the west country of Britain, the Dannonia from Dannonia, in Devon and the neighbouring areas. I mean, here we find a close association between descendants of Dan and the sea, and this is what has been prophesied, and this also helps confirm our identification of the peoples in question as belong to the tribe of Dan, as we have shown from other sources, and also helps strengthen our general identification of that area, of the whole geographical expanse of the area in question, as being the domain of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. May the Lord God of Israel bless you. Thank you.